times of need to help our fellow human beings, both at home and abroad. We're not perfect, but we step up. This is about our responsibility, our humanitarian obligation to save as many lives as we can, and our responsibility to our values. We value the inherent dignity of all people.
That was President Biden after announcing that his administration will buy 500 million doses of the Pfizer COVID vaccine and donate them to 100 countries over the next year. The White House was able to secure the deal in time for President Biden's European trip, in which he hopes to repair the relationships that soured during the last 4 years, and after pressure from other nations to share the vaccine. Our friend Charlie Sykes says this news presents a political Rorschach test for Americans, asking his readers today, what was your first reaction when you heard this story? Did you think, hey, this is what makes America good and great? Or why should we care about the rest of the world because America first? Charlie Sykes is back, along with PBS NewsHour White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, live for us in the UK, traveling with President Biden. Charlie, this is the most interesting thing I read this morning, and I know you're looking for feedback. What have you been hearing?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I was listening to your show yesterday when you were talking with Richard Stengel about this, and he described this as a modern-day Marshall Plan, and that was the moment I got the idea to write about this being a Rorschach test, because it struck me, how you react to this tells you what you believe, and it really helps define what we think America should be all about. So you inspired that. Overwhelmingly, my listeners say that they thought that this is a sign that America is good and great. But a sizable minority said, why only 500 million? Is that really enough? If we're really going to do this, maybe we should go even bigger because it's a big world out there. And I thought that was an interesting response as well, that people understand the scope of it. I think that people also get the sense that, yes, it's being good and it's being humanitarian, but it is also in our interest. It's in our interest to lead again, to establish these diplomatic ties, but also because it is in our interest. This is a global pandemic. And as long as you have an airborne pandemic anywhere in the world, then that is a threat to us. So this is enlightened self-interest.
Yeah, Yamiche, that conversation, and A.B. Stoddard was a part of it as well, and Eugene Daniels and Mike Memoli. And I think this is the Biden doctrine at home and abroad. He's not baited by the debates of the Twitter moment. It's not that he doesn't read Twitter. It's just that is not where he is fighting the fights. His bet is that you deliver. You deliver, and that's how you are sort of able to show, outputs. And that is his bet here at home. I think that is why they don't get drawn into all the political noise. And that is clearly now also his bet internationally.
It is absolutely his bet, and it's a bet that he's making domestically and internationally. And when I was pressing Biden officials ahead of this trip to really say, how are you going to convince European allies that the way that President Biden sees the world, that really is the American way, that the last 4 years of Trump, that they were in some ways a shift away from what is the true core of American beliefs. And they said it really is by action. It's by showing that America leads and that America will be taking the lead when it comes to fighting the virus. And what you heard from President Biden today was him saying, it is our responsibility as Americans to step up. And he said very clearly, we're not perfect. Nodding in some ways to the issues back home with the gridlock and January 6th and all of the different things that we are still dealing with as Americans. But he made it clear, even with all of that drama, even with all of our internal issues, we still are the leaders of this world when it comes to stepping up and showing people, here's what you do for the least among you. And then, of course, he nodded to the people who might be wondering, why should we care about the rest of the world? He said, this is in the best interest of America because this is a virus that is spreading here in the UK. One of the biggest variants that you're seeing is one that started when it was first seen in India. So this is going to continue to be an issue if we, as a society, and he says as a world, don't get this pandemic under control here. So I think President Biden was both saying this is part of our American values, but also this is how we keep Americans safe. And this is how we show America that America is in fact back. And there is some skepticism about that here among European leaders. But I think European leaders are also saying, okay, here's Biden with a plan and a strategy.
You know, it is so interesting, Charlie, and you do start to see, you know, this sort of Biden doctrine, I think, taking place if you piece together the right dots, and they really are not always obvious. They're not always shiny objects. But his view of all the spending, because I've pressed various officials, I'm sure Yamiche knows this better than me, is always that it's about competitiveness against China. It's about standing up to our adversaries strong at home. That and they so far, at least with the public, they have blunted the sort of standard Republican attacks. And I think this idea that the vaccines, the reaction that you have, and you have a pretty diverse sort of ideological spectrum, that no one's questioning that he did it. It's just, I like it, or it should be even more. It does suggest that he has succeeded in reframing some of the debates.
On this, he has, because this is a reminder of what America looks like when it is good and when it is compassionate, but when it also leads it because it looks strong. And I think that reference to the Marshall Plan was really, I think, important, because this took place after World War II, and it was described as the most unsordid act in world history, when the United States decided that it was going to step up and help rebuild Europe. That wasn't about, you know, the welfare society. That was about compassion and strength at the same time. And so, you know, after 4 years of looking at the rest of the world with disdain and thinking that, you know, America first, that somehow we could make Fortress America, or seeing all of this in strictly transactional terms, you know, we'll do this, but you have to pay for it. This, I think, is refreshing because it reminds people what genuine American greatness feels like and looks like. So I think that Americans looked at this and said, this makes us proud that we're the ones who are doing this. And that's a different kind of pride than we were being sold over the last 4 years.
This is something, I mean, I understand very well from the other end of the spectrum. I mean, Americans like to feel like the world likes us. And I know this from working for a president whose post 9/11 policies were extremely controversial the world over. Yamiche, I want to read some of these Pew polls about how people view President Biden around the world. 75% of respondents express confidence in President Biden. That is compared to 17% last year. I mean, Trump scared the bejesus out of me, but he also scared the bejesus out of all but 17% of these respondents.
That's right. And when I've been talking to experts, I've been trying to explain to them, I covered the NATO and the G7 when President Trump was there. Those are the only summits as a reporter that I got to cover. And I said, well, what does a normal summit look like? And they said, well, first, it doesn't look anything like what you've experienced. There are the impulses of President Trump, former President Trump, the elbowing of leaders, the calling into question, not what should be done in these organizations, but whether or not they should even exist. But European leaders were frankly scared. A lot of them were traumatized. There are deep scars in these relationships. And that's why you see President Biden really leaning into what we're calling this Biden doctrine of saying, here's what America can do. Here are our ideals. Here's what we should be proud of. Here's historically where America has always been. Because one of the things that Biden administration officials have been underscoring when I talk to them is when you look at American democracy, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they still had this feeling of America being a leader and of America valuing our European allies. And that was lost for a large part when it comes to President Trump, who was just openly hostile and was so mean in some ways to our European allies. That being said, there's still big questions about whether or not President Biden, just in being here, can do that. Deep scars are really something that takes, I've been told by experts, years. And there are a lot of European leaders who are going to be looking at America for a long time, wondering what exactly is going on with that democracy. And it might take several election cycles, I'm being told, to really do some of the work of restoring trust in America that President Biden wants to do with this trip.
Yamiche, you pack more reporting into one block than just about anybody I know. We will continue to bother you as you're many time zones away. And Charlie Sykes, you inspired this piece in this conversation today. So I think we're even now. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you both. Up next for us, FBI Director Christopher Wray today says we should anticipate more charges related to the January 6th insurrection. But trying to answer questions about how and why it happened is proving a bit more complicated, he says. That story is next.